This week's punchline is a little bit different. I have been raving on about this book, The Power of Moments, and cannot stop raving about it. So I thought I would attempt a mini summary. To be honest, it's just brilliant. You can see how many notes I've taken. So you've just got to read it. But here is my attempt in a couple minutes to give you some of the takeaways that I found really valuable both personally and professionally. So, number one, peak end rule. When we look back on experiences, whether it's with a service provider or in our life, we typically think about the peak, what was the highlight and the best part, and the end. So for me personally, what I took from that is how can we actually as a business try and create those peaks and amplify them, but also how do we finish? When we finish an engagement, what's the end? So I thought that was really interesting. There was a really interesting study done around TripAdvisor and hotel ratings, and where there was an element of surprise and delight, there was a 94% willingness to go on to recommend that hotel. And that was far higher than, I think it was around 60% of people that were just very satisfied. So if you surprise and delight, the knock-on effect in terms of recommendations is absolutely enormous. There was a really interesting point in the book around addressing the bad, that sometimes we don't want to address the bad. And there was a study done in a call center where they did a split test between people just getting on the phone and trying to address the person's question, or people getting on the phone saying, look, I can see you've tried to call quite a few times and you've had a few times trying to get through to us. Let's jump into it, blah, blah, blah. And again, it was off the charts. So 25% of the positives that people reported were actually people rectifying a negative. So it was sort of a service recovery. So that's really interesting that they go on to then mark it as one of the highlights. The book actually said as a joke, they almost wanted to artificially manufacture some negative experiences to then do a recovery from it. The next was, how do you create magical moments? So how do you exceed expectations? How do you break the pattern? How do you break the pattern of what you expect when you work with a service provider or you go to a restaurant or whatever it might be? There was an awesome example of a hotel that was pretty average, that they put in a popsicle hotline, and you could call and dial, and on a silver plate you got a free popsicle hotline, and it was one of the highest rated hotels in LA, despite not having the best hotel. It doesn't look anything fancy, but they put in place those magical moments. So that was really interesting. There was a really interesting study done here. If you elevate the positive, so focus on the positive rather than the negative, you'll earn 9 times more revenue than eliminating the negative. So focus on how do you make the positive even better than how do you make the negative even better. 9 times more in terms of revenue outcome from focusing on elevating the positive. I thought that was really, really interesting. There was a lot about shatter expectations, break the script. How can you do the completely unexpected? I had a good example of that in my personal life. When we moved house, we got into the house and the real estate agent phoned us about 4 p.m. that evening and said, look, you must be getting tired now, must be starting to think about dinner, probably haven't got anything set up yet. I've actually got you a voucher here for your local takeaway restaurant. Why don't you guys just order yourself a pizza or a takeaway of your choice? And it was just done absolutely beautifully. So again, we've started thinking about in our business and Sales Redefined and with our clients, how do you do that for clients? So I thought that was really interesting. One of the last ones I'll leave you with, because I could honestly go on for days, so if you're still listening, congratulations, is how do you help people trip over the truth? I really, really love this concept. So I can tell you that you should do ABC, but actually sometimes you need to see it for yourself. So there was an interesting study done with leadership team at Azure years ago. And they had to test and use the product for themselves. And suddenly they saw all the problems that customers had been telling them about, but they hadn't necessarily heard. And there were some interesting studies there around transformational experiences in third world countries. Rather than going and educating, they helped ask questions to help people trip over the truth. So the takeaway from it was, how rather than telling, can we start asking the right questions? And I found that one to be really, really powerful as well. So there are so many takeaways. I could go on for ages, but check it out, buy it, some big, big, big takeaways of how we can improve our sales and marketing.